Page 2. And page 3. Hearing no corrections. All those in favor of approving the minutes of January 9th, 2018, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? We'll move on then to public comment. Here wishes to make any public comment tonight? See nobody here to do that. We'll move on to the audit report. Jennifer Kennelly, Finance Director, is here to give us the lowdown on the audit report.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to apologize for the last minute, presentation of this. The audit is scheduled for 3 weeks earlier next year, so hopefully we'll get this in the middle of the budget process instead of the final night of the budget process. Just wanted to take a minute to walk through the different pieces of the audit and highlight a few items in each document. The first is the governance letter. So really, this piece of this document is presented specifically to the select board. And so what this shares with you is if just that all significant transactions of the town have been recorded, and if there are any misstatements, they're listed in here, and any disagreements with management. So it's really your communication directly from the auditors. This year we did have a few misstatements that we passed on. The largest of those was the final lease payment of the ambulance was actually recorded in 2016. It should have been recorded in the beginning of 2017. We found it immaterial because of the dollar amount and because at the end of 2017, that lease was paid in full. So if we had moved it, it wouldn't have changed anything significantly. Any questions on this piece? The next piece, I'm sure you read for the fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, right.
But really, again, I just want to highlight a few areas in here. First is the auditor's report. So what they do on page 1 is they give you their opinion of the audit. And their opinion is that these financial statements that you're looking at have been presented fairly. It's really what you're looking for in that document. The next section of the audit is the manager's discussion and analysis. So this is actually like an overview of the town from a layman's perspective. It doesn't have all the financial documents. It's really giving you the position of the town at this time and any stories behind any of the numbers. So really it talks about increases in revenue, items, things like that. And any financial highlights we had over the year. You'll see in here that the increase to the fund balance has been increased to 3.1 million, and that's what we've been talking about through this budget process. We've been talking about that fund balance and how that is out of compliance with our policy. The town's policy with the fund balance is between 10 and 20% of the following year's budget. So we're at about 28%. So on page 8 of that, we do have some revenue highlights. The first of those is the sales and rooms tax revenue. That was over budget by $178,000. So you'll see later on in the night when we talk about how to get to that increased tax rate of 2%, one of the things that we are recommending is that we budget a little bit higher on that item. And this is one of the reasons why we're doing that. Any questions on that section, the manager's discussion and analysis? Great, the next section.
Did this just come out today?
It was here on Friday, but it was like last minute on Friday.
Last Friday?
Last Friday,
Yep.
yes.
I just wondered if you expected us to read this, and are you going to quiz us at the end of it?
No, we're not. And again, that's why I'm really hopeful next time that you'll be able to get this a couple weeks ahead of time and
Right.
be able to,
Yep.
before I present to you tonight. It was kind of a last, driving them in from Montpelier on Friday afternoon.
Is this a requirement to have for the budget, the audit for the budget approval?
I don't know that it's actually a requirement, but it provides good information for you, especially, verifying where we're at with the fund balance. Looking at how, the next section of the financial statements that I wanted to talk about was that Exhibit F, which shows how we did to each line of the budget last year. So that just provides some good information of areas where we may be budgeting too heavy or budgeting too light. The notes to the financial statements are really stories behind the numbers is how I like to describe notes. Note 1 really just tells you all the accounting practices that we use here at the town. It also talks about any significant commitments that the town has and also debt that the town has. Supplementary information. The only piece of that that is required is in Exhibit 7, which is the retirement piece.
What page is that?
That is the final page. So Schedule 7 is the final page, the net pension liability. This is required to share in our audit. The other schedules are there just for reference, so you can see how those different funds are. I know one of the funds that we're talking about using some of its balance is the Public Works Building Fund. So if you flip back to page 59, you can see that there is a fund balance there of $653,000. We've budgeted to use 400 of that for the fire truck. That'll happen this year. But we're also suggesting to use 125 of that for the solar project, if that's something that we approve.
And to note, the difference, the additional amount is planned to use to buy the solar panels that are on top of the highway garage in 6 years. So that'll draw down pretty much the whole project at that point.
Any questions? And I'm always open to any questions that you have if you're reading through and you don't understand something or want more information. And this isn't your last shot at this.
I'd have to read it first, so, yeah.
Yeah. The final document is, I referred to that in my report as a single audit. They actually called it federal compliance. So this is our grants that we receive from the federal government. If we receive over $750,000 in federal funds, we need to have a single audit. This is the second year in a row that we've had a single audit, because we've reached that level. Main piece that you should be looking at from a select board perspective is on the final page there is really just their summary of results. And this will tell you if there are any findings, if there's any internal control weaknesses or material differences, they will be noted in here. One item that you'll note in section A, number 8, is the town of Williston was determined not to be a low-risk auditee, which you have to qualify to be low risk. And there's 5 requirements. We meet all of them except for the first one, is that you've had a single audit for 3 years in a row. Since we've only had it 2, we're automatically high risk. Everything else we've met, we have an unmodified opinion. We have no deficiencies in our internal control. And there's no doubt of us continuing as a municipality. I think we're all on that page. And in the past 2 audits, there have been no material weaknesses. So we have met all the requirements. If we do a single audit next year, we will be a low-risk auditee. Yes. And then I am required to file this single audit with the federal government by March 31st, and I will meet that.
At some point, do we approve this, or for the record, is it, it's
receive
just
it.
basically
We just receive
information?
it. Yeah, if we have questions, certainly, anytime, it's fair game to ask Jennifer. So the only significant finding in this report was the one that you already mentioned? Significant difference in the
Ambulance payment?
That was a misstatement of the audit, or it's a misstatement of the financials. And that is, it's not significant, which is why we could pass on it. And so there were 4 of those. Let's see. So a small adjustment, it's on page 2 of the governance report. So ambulance receivables, the way the auditors did their calculations were different than mine by $1,272. The prepaid expenses, that was the loan payment for the ambulance, how it was recorded in June of 2016. Deferred grant receivables, per our policy, we're not supposed to claim something, put something in as revenue unless we've received it within 4 months of the end of the fiscal year. We hadn't received $9,774. We have received that by this time, but we hadn't received it by October 31st. And then the sewer receivable is different than their calculations.
Thank you.
None of those are material change to the financial picture of the town. So we passed on some of those.
So the bulk of the work is done by our own staff to give the auditors all the information they need to do this kind of report. So it's a work of, a lot of work for Jennifer especially to do this.
So, Jennifer, I have to be honest, I'm an engineer, this is kind of gobbledygook to me, what it says. So my question is, or maybe it's more to Rick, it sounds like the town is getting, if we were to get a letter grade or a number grade, it would be excellent, it would be an A+.
Yeah, I would say so. And this is, Jennifer deserves a lot of credit for this, but it's, like she said, it's a team effort. So you also have to have cooperation from every department head and making sure they provide the information that is required during the course of the year, purchase orders, making sure all the contracts are in place. And Jennifer has continued the great work that we've had from Susan Lamb, who preceded her in this position. And so, yeah, I think you don't get much better than this as far as the quality of the work and the completeness.
I guess I would add to that, from a select board perspective, you don't get much better than this in terms of our confidence in town staff around financial issues, so thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you very much. We're a little bit ahead of schedule. We can't do the public hearing yet, but perhaps we can start discussion on the capital budget and program and recess that if we are not through with that by 7:30. So Rick and Jennifer, I presume we're going to talk about this.
Invite Jennifer back up. There was, well, it's kind of related to the operating budget too, because I think there was a change to this, or a couple changes based on our efforts to try to come in with a little bit lower tax rate. And so maybe you can explain some of the details as it relates to the capital budget anyway.
Yes, so we did provide an updated schedule of the capital, a little different than the one that you received in your packet or your books when you first started talking about capital budget. One change that we made on this was the highway replacement truck savings. I spoke about this last week, that we received more in trade for our highway truck last year, so we reduced the amount that we need from fund balance for the highway truck. So we're still keeping the 101,190 from the host town fund, and moved our fund balance request down to $8,810 for a total of $110,000.
What was it before?
It was 33,810, yeah, from the fund balance. Yes. So our request was 135,000 for the highway truck replacement. This year we're asking to, only for 110,000 because we received a higher than expected trade last year. And we're gonna continue to do that each year as we, get the trade from the prior year, of making sure that we're adjusting our request accordingly for the trade that we receive. The other difference is that I actually took the solar panels off the highway equipment request, and because that is a separate request. It was originally on this form when you received it. There was the 340,000 for the solar panels. That has been moved off. So we are still requesting to use $367,500 from the host town fund, impact fees of $95,710. From the fund balance, we are planning to use $289,810, and from grants and other revenue, $80,000, for a capital project balance of $833,020.
So we had numerous weeks to discuss the capital budget and program. Are there any questions before I ask for a motion?
Well, I guess the only question I have is, if we vote on the capital budget before the operating budget, is there an issue with that? Because we've already voted for this.
Oh, in worst case, if the board wants to change its mind as it gets
can.
into the discussion of the operating budget, you can revisit the capital budget. It's kind of a chicken and egg, which one do you
Right, yes, I get
vote
that,
on first?
yeah,
And so,
okay.
the way I view it, the capital budget is a component of the operating budget, because there's a specific
Yes.
line item relating back to this.
Right.
So you kind of have to adopt this
Adopt
first.
this one, okay.
If there's no further questions on the capital budget and program, the motion is in order.
I'd move to adopt the capital budget and program for fiscal years 2019 through 2024 as amended by the budget adjustment summary.
Second.
Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Good, we're taking care of that. And we'll start discussion on the general fund budget as well. Gee, thanks.
Or this week, sorry about that.
Three documents from you and Rick on this.
So, we're on the operating budget now, right? The goal was to, as we understood it, was to get the estimated tax increase down to about 0.5 cent. And I emphasize it's an estimate because last year at this time, we were also estimating 0.5 cent. We ended up with 0 increase. Now, that was unusual. So, and I don't expect it would happen again, but it's possible it might be less than 0.5 cent. But right now, we're estimating 0.5 cent. And in order to do that, we've given you a list of possible budget changes. The document is dated January 18th. And the recommended column shows the changes that we're proposing. And that results in a net decrease on the expenditure side of just about $49,000. We also recommend on the second page some revenue changes, including a little bit more from local options tax and interest income, and a little bit less use of fund balance than we originally talked about. And we did increase the ambulance service fees, because the board had talked about that at your last meeting, about the interest in adding 3 positions, and so with those 3 positions comes some additional revenue. So on the expenditure side, you'll see those 3 positions showing up as $63,580 additional, and then additional $25,000 in revenue. And then there's a couple other little changes here and there. We did take out the custodian, the full-time custodian position. That was an increase in hours more than adding a new position. It was just changing a part-time into a full-time, but we're taking that out of our request. And we've, I'm stealing all Jennifer's thunder on this. We've reduced property and casualty by 10,000 because the latest numbers we have show that we can do that and still cover our costs. And I think I've covered most of the items here.
The one big one that you didn't touch on was debt service, ambulance lease. That is a large decrease of 38,000. We're actually recommending, in order to meet this goal, to delay the lease replacement ambulance for 1 year. Chief Morton has reached out to other municipalities and other towns to see if that's realistic, to say, can we push our ambulance 1 more year? And he feels comfortable with that. So what they would do instead of, it was supposed to go into, they're actually starting the bid process right now to get a lease that would take effect next year. And we're going to delay that to have that lease start in 2020.
And Jennifer, because it's a lease and their annual payments, I don't like the concept, if we can avoid it, of just pushing an expense to a further year. But this isn't really doing that. This is
It's keeping the equipment 1 year longer.
keeping equipment, so getting better, for lack of better words, getting more value out of the existing equipment is the way I should look at this. Okay.
And also, you know, we had that conversation too. Are we just moving money that we should be spending this year into next year? And we actually think that there will be some room in the budget next year. We do have a few requests this year that are unique that we haven't had in years past. 25,000 for the church, 15,000 to start the housing trust fund. Those items were not in the budget last year, and so those are items we probably won't see a request from an outside source for 25,000 next year. Housing trust fund is probably something we'll work to accommodate in the budget for next year.
Okay.
Further questions, comments regarding the,
Well, it's just, this is more an observation than it is a question. As I went through this, as best as I understand it, this really is not, except for the custodian position, which is a reduction in services, but it's actually internal to the town versus necessarily what the residents will feel. This really doesn't affect the level of services the town will be providing. So you did a very good job, if you will, of sharpening the pencil, and I think, you know, making appropriate adjustment. I guess what I'm really getting to is I can support what you're proposing. I will support what you are proposing.
any further comments or questions for?
If you don't mind, just one question.
Sure.
Rick, you mentioned it's going to reduce the tax rate increase to about, did you say 0.5 cent?
I believe that's correct.
And Jennifer, you, in the first sentence of your memo to Rick, you say, in order to meet the select board's preferred tax rate increase of 2%. I just want to make sure that those two correspond to each other.
They are one and the same, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the actual numbers, or at least the estimates, are on the second page, the revenue page. If you look at the current, and I'm looking at the bottom block of numbers, the property tax rate current, it says 2656. Manager budget was 2727, and recommended, which includes all the different adjustments on both the revenue and expenditure side, is 2694. And so the difference between 2694 and 2656 is roughly about a half cent.
Okay. Which equates to about 2%. Okay.
Further comments or questions?
Yes, so there were three things that, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him when I came in. One was the Housing Trust Fund. I'm not sure we've done enough. I mean, I certainly support affordable housing strongly, but I guess I don't necessarily think the first path would be to tax homeowners for affordable housing. I'd like to see us push for inclusionary zoning. The second one is this environmental reserve fund, and I know we're not, but we're putting, I mean, when we first talked about Catamount, we talked about having a grant to cover those funds. So, and it popped up in the budget, kind of a surprise to me. And the last one is the church steeple. It may not be popular, but I'm not sure the town should be funding that either, so. Any discussion on that?
Sure. Let's start with, let's start with the church steeple, because maybe it's easier.
I want to hear your arguments, yeah.
Well, I don't know if they're arguments, more how I feel. I think it's interesting that the town clock is housed in a church steeple, but it is. Can't do much about that. And my feeling is, and this is a little bit facetious, but I think it gets the point across, if the town were not to participate in the rebuilding of the church steeple, the church would probably has the right to put the clock in a box and bring it to the next select board meeting and say, here's your clock, which I don't think is something we want. It's an odd situation, I will grant that, but because of that mixing of church and state, but this is about keeping the clock in the air so people can see it.
To put it in more of like a historical perspective, often churches subs as meeting places, town meeting places,
Oh,
and that was the tallest spot to put the clock, so.
And I don't know if you guys saw the email I sent. I'm fascinated by this clock. The fact that it's powered by a box of rocks, just, I mean, I think that's, I guess the point I'm making is the town, I didn't even know we had this resource.
I didn't
And it
either.
really is quite the resource, and, yeah, so I get, maybe I'm getting a little passionate here, I apologize for that, but if it was housed in the steeple up above here, we wouldn't hesitate for a second. Not hesitate, you didn't get,
Of course not, because it's the town hall, it's the
Yep.
town building. And
Yep.
We wouldn't want our steeple
Yep.
falling off of the roof of the town hall.
yeah, coming right through here.
Yeah.
May I
So
just-
that's my feeling.
I just add my comments that the church steeple really is the face of Williston. If you look at the number of people that pass through Williston, stop and take pictures of it, and just the ambiance that it has for the town, that's why I think we should support it.
Kind of a historical feature of the town.
Oh, very much.
Okay, and I have to say, since I've made the comment before, I've read up on it, and many towns have chose to do that, so I wanted to hear what other people had to say. I'm not so worried about the separation of church and state as I am just spending the money, so I wanted to hear, any other comments, or,
I'm in favor of it, but my main concern was the separation of church and state.
yeah?
But
I've read specifically about that, and it seems like every case that has come up on that has been,
Well, yeah, I mean, if I had a
Turned
time,
down,
if I had a time machine and make it so the town clock is not in a church steeple, I'd probably do it,
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
strongly advocate that a mosque be built, and that perhaps it be put in a mosque or a temple or something, just to.
or have one in each. or-
Yeah, or,
Yeah.
atheist meeting place perhaps,
Yeah.
but it's kind of an accident of history, so I'm in favor of the money.
Okay, all right. The next one is the Housing Trust Fund, and I don't, anybody want to comment on that?
I think we're not sure we're gonna get the grant for that, but we're also depleting.
this-
Oh, this is money, we're actually
Pardon.
putting money
Oh,
into the
housing
budget
trust-
for
no,
it.
no, the housing
Taxpayer
trust-
money.
Beg your pardon. No, talking about the wrong thing.
On the housing trust fund, I hear what you're saying. I think though ultimately, whether the money comes from property taxes or the 1% tax, sales tax that we get from, the businesses in Taft's Corners, is still gonna be government, it's still gonna be taxpayer money at some point. And so,
I wasn't suggesting it come from there either, though.
well, but if it comes from a grant, it's gonna be coming from somebody's taxpayer money.
No, I wasn't, well, I didn't mention grant,
Okay.
sorry, I don't know where that came, I think Terry mentioned grant, but.
Oh, you're saying not to spend? Yeah, I
Inclusionary
hear you.
zoning,
Wow.
so if we let somebody build hundreds upon hundreds of houses in Williston, should they be required to build some proportion of those in an affordable manner, right? In a more reasonable manner, because saving $15,000 a year, it really isn't going to do a lot to create affordable housing. Plus, we're taxing people who may be marginally able to live here in the first place. So I'm not a huge fan of taxing until we try inclusionary. And I saw the arguments because I'm pretty passionate about the subject. So when Deb was on the board, and I read some of her reports from the board, or I don't know I think actually Rick might have chaired it as well. I don't remember who chaired the board.
You mean the task force?
The task force, thank you.
Yeah, it was chaired by Debbie Ingram.
Yep.
I was merely staff to the.
The biggest reason for not doing inclusionary zoning at the time was that Burlington, Vermont had tried it, and they had failed. It wasn't as successful, but Burlington is I forget what they call it, it's an older community, so to do affordable housing in that kind of community, you have to do redevelopment, which is tear down, and that's a more expensive process. And what I've read, and again, I'm no expert, it's just what I've read and what I could find, inclusionary zoning works better in places where you do new development, like Williston, rather than old neighborhoods where you have to redevelop. So it seems like it's worth a try. The 15,000, it's not a huge amount of money. I think it's just one of those, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me when you have an affordability problem, to start taxing the people who are living here. So, I guess that was my 2 cents on.
Two comments or thoughts that I have. On the inclusionary zoning, I believe I'm in support of inclusionary zoning, at least in theory. I can remember back to when Mary Peterson and Ginny Lyons were on the select board, and I don't remember how, and Terry would have been too, I just don't remember how long ago that was. And
Has
we
Terry
had,
ever not been on the select board? No.
I could make a joke out of that about when the clock was installed, but yeah, I'll stay away from that. The point made, inclusionary zoning has been discussed for quite many years in Williston, and whether I agree or not, it's gone through quite a bit of vetting. And the town has chosen not to, through the town comprehensive planning process and our adoption of the zoning bylaws. So it wasn't just Deb Ingram. I mean, this has been has a long history to it. I may disagree with, or not, I may not agree with that, but that's neither here nor there. The other thing is, I look at the two as separate. Inclusionary zoning is different from whether the town should be supporting an affordable housing trust fund. And I look at this as $15,000 is not a small amount of money. But it's also, particularly with our budget, it's not a large amount of money either, and it's a seed, it's to get something started. I truly hope that we, through the development process, we can build this into a fund that is large enough to accomplish real things. The only way to do that is to start with the seed, and that's kind of what I look at as part of our responsibility here of doing. So I'm in support of it.
Terry, I have to agree more with
Okay.
you. I just feel that our job is to be looking out for the residents of Williston and
Yes.
trying to not increase their tax burden. And while I understand and respect what you're saying, it should not be on the backs of taxpayers.
My only point is, and again, we're not going to solve it here, obviously, tonight, and I don't want to keep people here to 10 o'clock, but it seems like we should at least try inclusionary zoning. Development has gone at a rapid pace in Williston to the great success of all the builders who build here. I mean, there are, the builders that build in Williston, there's a couple of them that have built an enormous number of units.
Oh, yes.
And we have the least affordable town, I think we've heard, in the county, or
Well, affordable from a tax rate standpoint, but, well,
affordable from a living,
Yep,
cost of
yep,
living, right? From a
yep.
home ownership
And fair enough, yeah.
perspective. Yeah, and we have a large number of people who live here or work
Yeah.
here who can't afford to live here. It's just, it's $15,000, I'm not sure I would decline to support the budget for $15,000, but I feel pretty passionate it's the wrong thing to do. And then, I was hoping to get a little discussion, again, sorry, I wasn't here last week, it was unavoidable, but the $220,000 for the environmental reserve, we'll take that out of our fund balance? That's where that comes from? Or is it part of the tax burden? I know it comes from the capital budget, but
200,000 of that is from fund balance, 20,000 is from the operating budget. Is that, yeah, okay.
it comes from, so it's kind of money we already have. I guess we'll get a chance, so it's kind of we're not increasing the tax burden as a result, 20,000. And we get a chance to vote on it later based on what we see from input from the group, the study group.
When you say later, you're talking about the actual decision to purchase or not?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
So I'm sorry, just a clarification question on this. At one time, I thought the amount that was going to go into that was proposed to go into the environmental reserve fund was 200 from the fund balance and then 60,000. That's
correct. What we're talking about, the 20,000 we're talking about is in addition to the 40,000 that's budgeted for the current
okay.
fiscal year.
Okay. Yep, okay.
You recall, I mean, this, at one point, the town's contribution to the Environmental Reserve Fund used to be about a penny. And, of course, the penny has grown faster than our contributions to the Environmental Reserve Fund. And at one point, it was as high as 80 or 90,000. And then when we had the Great Recession, the Select Board contributed no money for a couple of years. And then gradually, we've been kind of trying to play catch-up to the point where, if we do this one purchase now, we will be zeroing it out, potentially, depending on what happens with that grant that we're talking about.
So any other discussion on the Housing Trust Fund? Do we have any other?
I support the minimal amount that we put in this year, and let's determine what we want to do next year. We couldn't ask the planning commission to start looking at inclusionary zoning as well. That's not for tonight, but
No, of course not. So the thing that's hard, is this is my first time through the process, I'm sorry, and it's a huge number. Some of these things are fairly small in a $10, $11 million budget. So, I wish I had a line item veto. But I guess I don't. So, I guess I'm looking for guidance on,
when we get to a motion, you can certainly attempt to amend the motion by excluding
Right.
that, if you wish.
But I understand we don't have support for excluding things, because we've talked about it, so I understand that. So, in general, do we decline to support the budget if we decline to support a single item? Is that
You
typical?
may choose not to sign.
Right, I just understand the typical.
Let me, maybe this helps give you my thinking or philosophy, not philosophy, way too strong of a word there. My thinking on this is, last meeting, I evaluated, all of us, I think, have items in the budget that we may not fully support, for various reasons. But what I am going to support this budget, and the reason is at the last meeting, we discussed what we thought would be an acceptable or reasonable increase in the tax rate, or what people paid in taxes, the percent increase. And this budget does that. It does cutting some, significant items. I guess my point about that is, again, overall, I can support the budget, even though there are line items in this that, I don't want to say I would gladly cut, I don't mean it like that, but I could agree to cut, but the budget does what I think it needs to do. And I can support it because of that. And I should revise that. Look, this is a good budget, and I can support it.
I look at it like there's stuff on my dinner plate that I don't generally eat, but since it comes as a package, it's like, I ordered column A on the menu,
Okay.
and that's what it comes as, so,
Yeah.
I like most of the stuff, so, good enough.
No, and I agree. I think the town does a good job, obviously. I mean, we have a good income too to the town, so I think we benefit from that dramatically. If that income wasn't there, we might be in less good times, so, okay, that's all.
If there's no more discussion or questions or comments, a motion would be in order.
I'd move to adopt the general fund budget for fiscal year 2019 in the amount of $11,111,035.
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion?
So,
Reiterate, I think it's a good budget.
I feel strongly that we need to look at removing looking at other ways to fund a housing trust fund. It's a pretty immaterial size, so I'm not going to make a motion to take it out, so.
There's no further discussion. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we have passed that. We'll go back to,
Thank you, Jennifer, for
Thank you.
all of
Yes,
your work
thank you
and
very
staff.
much
That
indeed.
was impressive.
so we'll move backwards then to the public hearing on the community development grant application. And I'll just read quickly the public notice. The town of Williston is considering making an application to the state of Vermont for a VCDP implementation grant 2018 under the Vermont Community Development Program. The public hearing will be held on January 23rd, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. at the Williston Town Hall. To obtain the views of citizens on community development, to furnish information concerning the amount of funds available, and the range of community development activities that may be undertaken under this program, the impact to any historic and archaeological resources that may be affected by the proposed project, and to give affected citizens the opportunity to examine the proposed statement of projected use of these funds. The proposal is to apply for $600,000 in VCDP funds, which will be used to accomplish the following activities, which will be described by probably Amy Demetriowicz. The floor is yours.
I'm Amy Demetriowicz. I'm with the Champlain Housing Trust. And I just want to again thank you all for graciously considering sponsoring this application to the state for VCDP funds for a project that is not actually located in your town, but that does have a regional impact, and that's why we're asking for your support here. As you may or may not know, the city of Burlington gets its own allocation of CDBG funds, and therefore they are not eligible to apply for the same federal funds that the state gets. They have allocated $100,000 of their CDBG funds to this project, and they are considering another $100,000 allocation. But they can't go to the state for further VCDP applications, and it's only municipalities that can apply for that funding. So really appreciate the town's willingness to consider this application. The project is the Old North End Community Center, and it's located in the former St. Joseph's School at 20 Allen Street in Burlington. The St. Joseph's School is a beautiful old historic brick schoolhouse, 3 stories, beautiful hardwood floors, pressed tin ceilings, the classrooms with the slate chalkboards, and a big gymnasium with a stage. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. And since the time that the school closed, the diocese has rented the space out to 3 regional nonprofits, including the Robin's Nest Daycare. They've actually been there for over 30 years. They provide daycare to people throughout the region. The Janet Munt Family Room, which provides parent education for people, again, throughout the region. They do some great programming there in terms of child education and parent education. And the Association of Africans Living in Vermont, AALV, has been there as well for about 10 years. And they provide a number of different social services to recent new Americans in the community, again, very much regionally in the Chittenden County area. So those 3 programs that had been housed there for quite some time were at risk of being displaced when the diocese was deciding that they may need to sell the property. So they approached us to see if CHT would be able to secure the property for them so that they could stay in place. And it was an exciting project, and we were very, very much eager to take it on. It was also, the building was not entirely occupied, and so we saw it as room to really expand a community center. It also, one of the reasons it wasn't fully occupied was because it didn't have an elevator, so it didn't have that accessibility. We were able to negotiate with the diocese, and we've actually installed an elevator at this point. So the whole building is completely occupied. The program that has been added is the Burlington Parks and Rec has rented the 2nd floor, and they have subleased to a number of different tenants, including Very Merry Theater, a youth center for the Old North End, the senior center, Hindu temple. They have the building is just a really exciting combination of all sorts of folks coming in for just a myriad of programs, from, new American families coming in, and Graco has, they make car seats, and they have a car seat day, and they're installing free car seats in people's vehicles so that they can be safe. It's a really exciting building with an amazing number of uses and activities going on at all times. However, the building, it's a great building, but it really is in need of a lot of upgrades. And that's what this program, this grant application is really for. It hasn't really been renovated since the 60s or 70s. For example, there's one thermostat in the entire building in the principal's office, so that controls the heat for all 3 floors of this 52,000 square foot building. So those sorts of systems need to be upgraded. There's 1 electrical outlet per classroom, I guess, for the projector, so the teacher could show some slides. We need to upgrade the electrical system, the heating. We need to add air conditioning because now it's a full year use. We need to install a sprinkler system. We have installed the elevator, and we've put in a commercial kitchen for uses, including training folks in the food service industry. We are, one of the issues with the VCDP grant is that you need to document beneficiaries. For that reason, we're going to target the grant towards AALV because they're already collecting income data and demographic data for their participants. So it's sort of administratively, it will be the easiest way to document the benefits. So I want to tell you a little bit about what AALV does. It's called the Association of Africans Living in Vermont because when it was founded a little over 10 years ago, it was really more of a social group of folks from Africa, recently here from Africa, to get together and talk about their experiences being new to America. Since then, they've really developed into a social service agency, and they now serve refugees and immigrants from everywhere. Wherever folks are coming from, they're welcome at AALV. They've even stopped using Association of Africans Living in Vermont, and they just are called AALV now. They provide job training, as I said. They have a licensed nurses aid program, so they're training folks into that. They assist folks in starting farms and having the ability to grow food and sell food to create income for their families. They have teen programs and mentoring programs. They provide mental health services. They do a lot of health education that's culturally appropriate, so they may do some sex targeted. They do domestic violence education. They've got a myriad of programs, and through those programs, they are collecting a lot of client income and demographic information. So it'll make that reporting for the VCDP program easier if we target it to that one program. The total, so we're asking for this application to be for $600,000 in VCDP funds. Those are federal funds. The total project cost is $7.8 million, including the acquisition of the building, all the renovations, and all of the other legal expenses. The other sources of funding, we're working with this program called the New Market Tax Credit Program, which is a fairly complicated federal tax credit program. We are undertaking a capital campaign that's being led by Peter Clavel to raise funds from donors and philanthropists, and that's moving right along. We're also reaching out to social impact investors, so people who are interested in making an investment in the building, mostly to see the social impact that their investments can have and to get a small monetary return. And then we are planning to make many energy efficiency upgrades to the building, so we'll be looking for some grants to help support those efforts. The VCDP funds would come to the town of Williston, and then we would be looking for those funds to be granted directly to CHT. CHT would then grant those funds into the new market tax credit structure so that it would be used in that financing structure. We would be taking on as much of the administrative burden related to that grant as possible. I'm going to write the grant. We're going to do all of the reporting and ongoing monitoring. We're going to obviously be managing the construction and so forth. We will need to rely on town staff to deal mostly with the finances. First, the town staff has to review the grant and push those buttons that says, yes, yes, we want to do this. It's on behalf of the town. And then managing making sure to have the financial records of when funds have been dispersed. So we try as much as possible to minimize that impact. The project can pay for the legal expenses that the town incurs for taking on the grant, and also if the town needs to do a single audit, we can cover that expense as well. So there will be some staff time, but we don't expect there to be any sort of other financial burden to the town. And the process from here is you have a resolution to consider tonight. The application is due on February 6th, and I'm working away at that, and I would be looking to Rick to press the submit button once that's complete and he's had a chance to review it. It's all online. And then there's a VCDP board meeting that's held on April 12th, where they will consider all of the applications.
Good, thank you. It appears that there's no one else here for public comment on the public hearing, so I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion to close the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I should say aye as well, make it unanimous. And we'll go on to actually considering the resolution, but before you disappear. So, okay. I had the opportunity to tour the facility yesterday, both because of the hearing, public hearing tonight, and also because of a probable request to the legislature in the capital budget for some funding there, which has not occurred yet. But it's a fantastic building. I met the gentleman who is in charge of the refugee program there. Very Goodfella and a whole bunch of people that were there, taking part in the programs that were there when I was there. And it's an old school, structurally sound, but needs a fair amount of work. So are there questions or comments regarding the application?
So it went kind of fast, so remind me, CHT?
Oh, I'm sorry, the Champlain Housing Trust.
Okay, that's, okay. And the name of the organization that runs this is the school or the facility?
We're calling the building the Old North End Community Center because of
Okay.
where it's located, but the Champlain Housing Trust is currently the owner of the property. We did purchase it
Oh.
in July. We purchased it from the diocese. But now we're putting together that full financing package. As part of that new market tax credit, we will be selling the property into a new partnership that will be able to take advantage of that new market tax credit. The new partnership will include the investor in those tax credits. So there will be a new entity that will get created as part of that.
So the $7.8 million you've already collected or saved and used
Well, we're in the
some.
process. The
And-
capital campaign is ongoing. That's the one that's chaired by Peter Clavel. We don't have all of the funds committed yet through that process, but we're working on it, and we are hoping that we're going to be able to close on that new financing structure and have all of the funds committed by September. And at that point, we'll be able to, make that transfer to the new partnership and begin the renovation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments?
Well, my next question is, I guess, to Rick or the staff, or maybe Jennifer. Does this impact asking for this grant for the Burlington Community Center? Does this affect our ability in the town at all, or is this?
Well, it is, Amy mentioned, there is some staff time required, particularly Jennifer's time. Our biggest concern going into this was the cost of the single audit. And you had, remember Jennifer said we had 2 in a row, well, this would probably make 3 in a row. But Amy is committed to covering that cost for the town.
Okay.
So with that understanding, we don't have any objections to this.
This is for, the grant is state or federal?
It's federal money that comes to the state.
Okay, all right, great.
I believe this is the third such grant application that we've dealt with here.
Sounds like a great,
Yeah, and this
Service.
is that strange technicality that the town of Williston is applying for this, basically, because there are technicalities that prevent other people who are more directly involved from doing it. And it doesn't really hurt us, so it works for me.
I didn't really understand all that
Yeah.
when she spoke of
It's-
it, but
We're
it seems
just-
like a good idea.
Just being neighborly.
So the only question, or actually 2 questions, actually the question I thought you were going to ask, Terry, was, will our applying for this grant, for all the good reasons for doing it, in any way limit grants that we could apply for projects in Williston?
That was, I thought, the question I asked, but I thought I heard,
I didn't answer that question, but to my knowledge, I'm trying to think, I'm not sure we've ever applied for a community development grant, partly because we don't have the population that would score well when we're competing for the grant monies. And Amy is more knowledgeable about that process than I am, but
I can also say, I think that that's probably true. It does need to have a low and moderate income benefit. So you are needing to have a program that does target that population. The other issue is typically a town can't have 2 applications going in the same round. But you can always, the next round or, a year from now, it won't have any impact on your future ability to apply.
in other words, the length, there's no, like,
No.
3 years we couldn't?
No, it's just, you would never put
Thank
2
you.
applications in at the very same time. And you don't have another one going in, so.
yeah, we don't have any planned.
Yeah,
Right, okay, so the risk of this inhibiting us in some ways is very, very low.
yes.
And then my other question had to do with actually the single audit again, but I'm going to ask the question in a slightly different way. This year, we had to do a single audit. Would we, let's just say you didn't come to us for this for us to apply for this grant, would we still likely go through the single audit, have to go through a single audit?
Well, actually, the timing, I was, maybe spoke a little too quickly on the timing, because we're talking about this fiscal year is different than next fiscal year, and this money, I think, would be received next fiscal year, not this fiscal year. So I don't know how we stand in terms of grants for this fiscal year.
This fiscal year, the majority of our grants are state dollars.
Okay.
For all the neighborhood stormwater grants that we're receiving, those are state dollars. The only federal one that I can think of that's large off the top of my head is the sidewalk grant for Blair Park Loop project, and that project has just started. So there's a good chance that the majority of those dollars will be spent in the same year as this project. So there is a good chance that we will have a single audit that year,
What is your fiscal year?
July 1st through June 30th.
Yeah, we would be expecting September. Yeah.
So it sounds like we may not need a single audit this year, so we won't make our 3 years in a row.
We won't make our 3 years.
We'll have a 1-year break, but it's, you know.
So we'll never get to the low risk. Okay.
Further questions or comments? Motion is in order.
Oh, I'm sorry, one other one. The, I'm sorry, the single, I guess the application form that's in front of us that we're supposed to sign, it does not mention the grant amount. Is that a concern?
Is this the resolution?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I guess it's the resolution.
That's a form directly from the program. So I noticed that too. It doesn't have a space for the grant amount, but that's the way they've written it. It's very clear in the application.
And you're authorizing me to review the application. so-
Okay, then that answers that question, okay.
So a motion is in order.
Move to adopt the resolution for the Vermont Community Development Program grant in support of proposed renovations to the former St. Joseph's School in Burlington.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, and no abstentions?
I will be
Very much.
I'll be circulating the resolution for
Fine.
signature.
Thank you.
So you'll support us when we want to put our senior center in Burlington. So that, just a side question, just associated with that, we have no, because of the income distribution of Williston, we have a harder time getting these kinds of grants. So for instance, like, I'm actually being serious on this whole idea of a senior center. We,
Many, many years ago, one of my jobs was writing grants, and I remember seniors were assumed to be low to moderate income. Has that changed?
I think you would need to prove that they actually are, but I don't know. I haven't done a grant for a senior population. I think though you'd have to show actual income. So you could do that though. It would just be that you would need, the senior center would need to start collecting income information. You did support a long time ago an ACG application for affordable housing at Maple Place. So there are projects that you may support in your town that would have a very specific low-lying benefit. And it needs to only be 51% of the clients need to be low and moderate income.
thank you. Do we,
So let's move on to the water fund budget.
do we have Amy's name somewhere in,
Pardon me?
the person who just presented? It's Amy.
Amy
Demetrius.
Demetrius.
Okay.
Water fund budget. So Rick and Jennifer.
I don't know, the board didn't have any comments on this really of any substance when we went through it the first time through, so I don't know. And the,
No, we have not made any changes to any of the utility budgets.
Is there any questions or comments regarding the water fund budget? If not, a motion is in
I
order.
mean, it's very similar to previous year budgets. I mean, I'm not happy it's going up, but it's, similar to previous year's budgets, cost of living type things, not cost of living,
Well, this budget and the sewer budget are driven in large part for
By
the
others,
fees that we
yeah.
pay.
Yeah.
In this case, it'll be the water district, and in the other sewer budget, it's the Essex Junction treatment plant.
They've got us.
The motion is in order.
I'd move to adopt the water budget for fiscal year 2019 in the amount of $1,229,200.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. Sewer fund budget.
Would the chair entertain a motion?
I would indeed.
Move to adopt the sewer budget for fiscal year 2019 in the amount of $1,782,500, what, sorry, $1,782,585.
Second.
Is there discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No abstentions, all right.
I would say that, this sounds stupid, but I'm actually being serious. The tour of the sewer treatment plant in Essex Junction was rather entertaining and enjoyable and educational, and if we could arrange for another thing like that, I'd go.
Warmer weather perhaps?
Warmer weather would be great.
Did you just do that? Just,
No.
Oh, no, a number of years ago.
Years ago, I think we were negotiating with Essex, or we were.
Is that before or after the
was
major
before.
renovations?
Before,
it was before, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
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 you can arrange that?
Yeah, I mean, that's
You
some
will
of
get,
our-
Select board field trip.
you will get a firsthand view of a key effort to improve the water quality in Lake Champlain,
Yes.
the phosphorus removal.
I still tell my daughters that they're too old to really care about this being 13 and 15, but when we're driving by, I say, that's where our sewage goes. They're always like, why do you try to educate us to this kind of stuff? Because I'm a nerd. That's what I
Gotta
do.
go somewhere.
I miss it when it's gone.
I couldn't
The
even
other
tell you
place-
where it is. Where is it?
It's on the other side, it's on 2A.
Cascade
just past
Street.
the bridge from Williston into Essex, near IBM, well, near Global
Yeah.
Foundries.
These are off the trees, you can see it from Route 2 as you're driving across.
Okay.
The other place we should visit some point is the water treatment plant.
That's the one I'd like to see.
should.
Yeah.
Champlain Water
CWA.
District, which is another
Yeah. With
fascinating.
all of the scares around the country for water quality, it would be good to see that.
First-class plant, so yes.
It would be cool. Yeah, for sure.
We'll arrange those tours.
All right.
Yeah.
Stormwater fund budget.
Will the chair entertain a motion?
I will.
Move to adopt the stormwater budget for fiscal year 2019 in the amount of $744,520.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there discussion on the motion?
Sorry, I had one quick question. The budget is built around, or there will be no increase in the stormwater fee?
That's correct.
I just want to make sure, which is different than the other two budgets
That's correct.
we just approved. Okay.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No abstentions. Comprehensive Energy Plan petition. Here we do have just the,
Well, everybody, congratulations.
Yeah.
It's quite an effort.
yes.
The budget's getting
Yeah, the
involved.
budget is, yes, thank you indeed.
We are not meeting next week, right?
We are not meeting this week.
I don't know what I'm going to do.
The marathon is over, so yeah.
We should all, well, we can't all meet, can we, for beer? Can't do that, can we? Sorry, never
We
mind.
can, as long as we don't talk about it.
All right.
We can.
Sorry, comprehensive.
So a few
energy
weeks
plan.
ago, we had people in who were interested in having this petition that they intended to have signed, but we discussed the process with them, and they have, would appreciate us putting it on the warning for the discussion at the town meeting night, rather than being on the Australian ballot. And you saw in here there, the short number that they had on this one particular petition. I think it had 247 people sign out of the roughly 450 or so that they needed, but we knew that they were probably not going to get the number of signatures, and had more or less on a straw vote agreed that we would put this on the warning. So anything further, Rick, on?
No, I think I mentioned in my report that I had prepared some draft language, because using this whole resolution in the warning for town meeting was a little cumbersome. So I boiled it down to one sentence, and I had reviewed it with people who proposed this petition, and they came back with 2 sentences. And then I had that legal counsel review it, and legal counsel liked my version better, with one minor change. And so I included that minor change, and that's what you have in the draft warning. And I shared that information with the proposers, and I didn't have any negative feedback from that.
Questions for Rick or comments?
With these kinds of resolutions, could somebody refresh my recollection, do we have a policy or a town ordinance on what is and is not allowed for a resolution at town meeting?
We do not have an ordinance, and we don't have a written policy. You do have a little bit of a past practice. Eric's done a fair amount of research on this, so he can fill you in both past practice and what the requirements are as it relates to this.
Yeah, state statute specifies if a petition comes before the board, certain instances where the number of 5% of registered voter signatures, the board would need to have that on the warning. This is something that doesn't fall under those circumstances, so it's at the discretion of the board to consider whether to place it on the warning or not, even if it did have the 5% of signatures. So it's a case-by-case basis for something like this.
If it does get 5% of the signatures, then we have no choice but to put it on?
It depends if it's dictated state statute as something that would be required to put on. For example, to adopt the town manager form of government.
Okay.
That's one, but this is something, town energy use, not something a state statute requires that the board be compelled to put on the warrant at that point, so it's at your discretion.
In the town, we had done some research on past years where the board has included various articles.
What are those examples?
Well, the one I can think of is and actually this is a petition that did have sufficient signatures, but the board wasn't required to put it on. That was an advisory vote on the roundabout down at the intersection down the street here. There was more than the required signatures, but it wasn't an issue. The state law actually clearly put the select board in charge of that decision. And the select board decided to allow that petition to be part of the, actually it was an Australian ballot vote, as I recall. And there have been other issues too. Citizens United was one.
Where were they presented?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. So my problem with this was, it was so poorly articulated. And I am afraid that if you allow this at town meeting, it is going to be a free-for-all that takes up a ginormous amount of time that nobody's going to structure. I really wish that you had been here, Ted, because I would have appreciated your commentary. But I just feel that while the discussion may be important, which is what Teresa is bringing up, I don't want to see a town meeting go for 2 days because they can't articulate their point, and nobody's going to moderate it and get it down.
They were very disorganized, I agree.
They couldn't even, they could not articulate what it was they wanted. And I also had a problem with, they didn't want to go get the signatures because they didn't want to go get the signatures. Well, we're all out there getting petition signatures at this point in nasty weather. It's what you gotta do. I know it's not warranted for this, but I think those 2 things kind of bothered me. Here's my 2 cents.
The concern that I have with these kinds of resolutions and advisory type things is that if we open the door, and I want to be clear, I support what they're trying to say. I agree with the environmental issue that they're talking about 100%. I am passionate about it. But I'm not inclined to put this on for town meeting because it's not directly related. The roundabout was, this isn't. And we've had other examples in the state going back to the 80s with, funding of the Contras in Nicaragua, with partial birth abortion, gay marriage, this kind of thing. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed about the town of Williston is that with the town government, it's nuts and bolts. Now there are, it's about property taxes and plowing and, keeping our tax rate low enough so the school can have some of the tax rate too, and, things like that. I would be, my heart is inclined to put this on, but I don't think that I'm comfortable doing that because, the fact that I agree with this issue doesn't mean that it should be something that we should have municipal meeting taking a position on. And that's this concern that I have, is that because the year after this, somebody can come in and say, well, I'm going to be a little facetious, I suppose, but well, ExxonMobil did a study and they said there's no such thing as global warming, and I want that on the budget, and I do have 5%. Okay, where are we going to draw the line? That's my thought.
The hard thing for me right now is, I'm very much in the same boat. I support the concept of this, but I absolutely get is that our role, is to put this on the warning?
I think it's-
Particularly given when, if we say yes to this, doesn't that mean down the road, next year, we would have to say yes to something we disagree with? If it was as, for lack of better words, by innocuous, I mean, not that this won't have impact, I mean, it's not doing anything negative. Well, having a discussion about whether Exxon is right, that they're, facetiously, Exxon is correct, that there is no global warming, is innocuous also. But I wouldn't support that one. And so that concept of playing God, for lack of better words, I look at it as, I have trouble with that.
I have to agree with it. I think we should be taking a narrow purview of what our job is supposed to be and not broadening it too far because of all the reasons everybody just brought up.
So my question is and probably for the attorneys, and probably for Rick and Eric from a town, adopting this resolution has no binding effect, right? This is basically, I look at this and maybe I certainly support the issue. Whether it's the biggest issue we have right now or not, that's very debatable. It's probably not the biggest issue we immediately have, but, it's an issue that I personally would like to hear what the people who want to talk about it have to say. And I look at the town meeting as one of these institutions that allow residents to speak up, or groups of residents to speak up. And to me, it's a way to get an indication of how the town residents feel and would affect, in the coming year, how I would think about, voting on various conservation actions. So from that perspective, again, it's non-binding, so I feel like people should be allowed to have their say. It seems like they put in a pretty good effort. They didn't get all the votes they put in. How many votes did they get? 270?
Something like that.
Yeah, in the minus something weather at the time that they were supposed to be picking them up. So I feel for them a little bit. They should have started earlier. They were very disorganized, but I still feel that's kind of the purpose for town meeting is to, maybe hear the residents. Again, it's non-binding. It's not like we're voting to tie our hands, which would be a problem.
Is there not a point, a time during that meeting that there is a public comment, somebody can bring something like that up versus us making this a part? Yeah, there's a new business or something else, so there is their opportunity to bring that up without us making that a part of the formal
Oh,
agenda.
you're right, and they did it before too, didn't they? They did it with
Correct.
the
Last year
taxes
they did.
for Donald Trump, right? That resolution, they actually forced a vote by overturning the, what is it, the moderator?
Yes. But there is a way that the moderator could say, yes, this is appropriate to bring forward or not, as he did last year. And the town has the right to overrule the moderator to bring it forward, so, yeah.
Can I ask another question, just on, I understand Ted's concern and Joy's concern about them being disorganized and having this run on. Does the moderator have the ability to kind of rein in a topic, rather than keeping it,
Yes.
you know, can he allocate a certain amount of time for it, or can we, as a group, say, I guess I'm saying I would like to hear feedback, but I don't want to hear 2 hours of it. I think we should hear clear feedback, get a sense from the town. Plus, if we get a lot of people coming out, you kind of know that it's a topic people want to talk about, rather than if there's 5 people, like the 3 or 4 we had here show up, then we know it's a topic that maybe isn't on the forefront of the residents' minds. It just, that's,
So the moderator does control the meeting to some extent, and hopefully the moderator would limit debate, but I'm not sure that we can limit the amount of time that is devoted to it.
Can somebody in the audience call the question? Isn't
Well, absolutely.
there the ability to do that?
If there's a motion
they
made,
do
yes, sure.
And they do that. So the one thing I am struggling with, and I just want to express this, is when we had the question back when the 3 of them came and presented this idea, they asked if we would, if they got the number of signatures, whether we would put this on the ballot or not. And I remember thinking, yes, even though we're not required, that made total sense to me, because they met this threshold. And so what I'm struggling with right now is they didn't meet this threshold, that 5%, but they got a significant number of people. I mean, maybe even more that will be than at the meeting. Does that count for something?
I thought we also agreed at the time that we agreed that we would,
I did not agree to that.
no, I mean, I think we had
Majority did.
a majority did,
Yeah.
3 or more, agreed that we would
Yeah.
allow them on the ballot if they didn't even go out and get signatures.
So I'm struggling with, they did, I mean, so the point I guess I'm making is 5% seemed like a significant number that it would cause me to say, yeah, makes sense to do it. I guess part of what I'm saying is they got a significant number. It may not be 5%, but still a significant number. Ought not we take that into consideration? And I'm asking that as a question.
Did you just reverse what you just said though before?
You can hear that I'm waffling, and I wish I had a clear sense, and I don't. So I'm looking for any thoughts on this.
I think it's a big enough issue that, and it affects the way we spend money, in terms of changing the way the town expends dollars for fuel, and I want to know what the residents think. I mean, I feel like we're just representatives of the residents, right? We're supposed to be. So, and there's so few people who show up for this meeting, good or bad, that.
You mean the select board meeting or the town?
This meeting. I mean, on a weekly, look for the budget, we just approved the budget, and I don't think we had any audience when we finalized the budget. So, so I'm looking for, I guess, in this forum, the town meeting, direction from, tell me what you want. So that's why I'd like to see or hear topics. And the fact that somebody came in and wanted to do it and collect the signatures to me says, gosh, it's the only one, isn't it?
And would you, I'm just going to explore a little bit, would you feel the same way if you didn't agree with the petition that was being asked to put on the warning?
Well, I think we have some responsibility not to do silly or trivial things, right? I think that's part of
I think
our
Right.
role. I don't feel it affects the way we spend money, so it affects the way the residents feel, so I think it's a valid topic. If it was something silly or trivial, I'd say,
Yeah, should Donald Duck, whatever, be president, right?
Yeah.
But-
Or should we require Donald to provide
Yeah,
tax,
but-
whatever those things are, but
But
things
if
we
it was
have.
a legitimate issue, but you disagreed with it, you would still feel the same.
I want to hear, I've offered to go to meetings where I'm not in agreement with the people, because I want to hear what the town people say, right? Even if they're not of the same,
Yeah.
background or
Philosophy as you or whatever.
philosophy, exactly. So I have offered to do that, so, and I'm a happy participant, because I want to hear, what people have to say. And I think I can learn, from anybody, so.
I would support putting this on the warning for town meeting night. I think we gave the indication to the individuals who are here that we would do so. I think it's worth discussing in a limited amount. The town does have a comprehensive energy plan, and while this talks about the state plan, I think it's worth talking about. As Barry said, it's not a binding resolution, but I believe it's worth talking about. So with that, if perhaps we could have a motion, a positive motion, and we can see where it goes.
I move to include an article for discussion and vote at the annual town meeting in support of the state implementing their comprehensive energy plan, and in addition, encouraging the town to continue efforts to implement energy efficiency measures and preserve town lands.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there discussion then on the motion? If not,
Like I said, I'm going to vote against it, but I'm very much in favor of what the resolution would, the tenor of the resolution it's the procedure that I'm voting against.
I echo Ted's sentiments.
so if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay.
Nay.
So the motion passes 3-2. Then we can move on to the solar panels purchase. And I think Jennifer and perhaps Jeff Ford perhaps are going to talk about this. Sure, please. Evening.
Greetings again. It's good to see you once again. It's a very progressive town. You guys are doing interesting things.
Thanks.
Richmond does too.
So I assume that the select board got a copy of my memo. Did they get a copy of my memo?
Yes.
So what I was charged with doing was looking at the appraisal that was done for your solar project behind this building, to evaluate it and see if the amount that was in the original contract seemed reasonable. So I guess, what I came up with was it appears to be reasonable to me. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you had as to how I came about to that conclusion based on my memo.
Questions?
Well, could you just kind of do a high-level overview of the way you did that?
Sure. So what I evaluated was what the production has been over the last 4 years. Actually, after I wrote the memo, I was able to get 5 years' worth of data, which only changes the outcome slightly. And then I projected out what the revenue stream would be for the project. I also, and I included in that projection, I included operation and maintenance costs, planned replacements of like the inverters, and inflation for both general inflation and for electric rates. I also researched what it would cost to install a system such as this now under today's costs, and approximated what I felt was probably the install cost back at the time that you did this. The cost of solar panels have gone down quite a bit since you installed this. They just went back up again yesterday because of the federal government's trade policies. But I have my own solar project on my own farm, and I've tried to develop similar projects to this. And what I felt was a fair arrangement for any project that I developed would be to, at the time of transition, is to offer the cost of the installation at about 50%. The tax credits and the depreciation reduces the installed cost by about 50%. There's a 30% federal tax credit that I'm sure this project, used. And when you depreciate the equipment off your income tax, it depends on how much you pay in income tax and what your tax rate is, but I estimate it's probably around 20%. So to me, a fair price is about half the cost of what it costs you to install it. The kind of the net cost of what it costs the developer to install it. All of these numbers line up about the same. For the amount that they were suggesting in their contract, it's roughly, as best I could determine, about half the cost of what the install cost was at the time. And the revenue from the project over its life, it looks like it's a pretty good rate of return. I think Jennifer estimated around 10% per year. I think that's about right. And that seems like a reasonable deal. The life of the panels typically have a 25-year warranty, which manufacturer warranty, which if the manufacturer is willing to warranty it for 25 years, it'll probably last a good deal longer. The inverters have a warranty of about 10 years. I think common practice, at least certainly the way that I've done my analysis, is to expect replacement around year 15. Some will last longer, some will last shorter, but I think an average of 15 seems reasonable. And so I projected that out in my analysis as well. I inflated all of those costs annually by 2.5% to give a relative dollar amount. I didn't use a discount rate for municipalities. It seems to me that the discount rate is about the same cost as what your cost of borrowing money would be. It kind of washes, it kind of, works one way or the other to kind of net it out. And so these dollars are in today's dollars over the life of the project.
Just really simply, that was probably more than.
That's more than you wanted, I'm sorry.
More than I wanted to hear, and what's the net effect on the taxpayers of the town? So we pay for energy to run things. This removes some of that cost. And, into that you have to factor the maintenance, as you said, replacement of parts and pieces. And have we verified that the warranties do exist on the panels and the inverters, that they are 25 years and 10 years?
I talked to All Earth Renewables who supply the equipment, and that's what they told me, yes.
Okay. So what is the net effect on the citizens? Do we spend less every year as a result of this throughout the life and throughout the time that we'd be paying for the panels?
Let me answer that, and then I'll let Jennifer speak. Right now, what you have, the deal that you have right now with Green Lantern is the company that you have your contract with, is for every kilowatt hour that's produced by this system, it's applied against your electric bill, and then you pay them 95% of the value of that. So there's a 5% discount on the electricity that's produced. So that's your gain right now. If you were to buy the system for $345,000, you would get 100% of that would be applied against your bill, not a percentage.
Sure.
So you get the benefit of that, and that's what the revenue stream in my spreadsheet is about. It's the revenue from the electricity production.
What is that revenue?
It's actually offsetting your electric bill, so it reduces your cost.
No, I understand, but what's the 5-year average?
It was about $32,000, plus there is, Green Mountain Power, the state really has a a program that provides an adder for solar electricity. You get a 4-cent adder for every kilowatt hour that's produced. So, and that for the next 4 years, it only lasts for 10 years. For the next 4 years, that's another $9,000. So the revenues is a little over $40,000 for the first 4 years.
That's the number that sticks in my head from.
So that, it isn't revenue, it's reducing your electric bill by about that much.
And what are we spending, what would we be spending per year to purchase these, or do we purchase them just outright?
Right, and so that's what I looked at. I said, if we're going to do this solar purchase, we should look at it as we'd look at any capital project. So first of all, what is the purpose of this? And does this meet with the town plan? So I looked at the town plan. We do actually have something in our town plan that says the town, when the opportunity arises, should be a leader in solar, in energy saving projects. So that was the first thing I looked at. The second thing is, how would we fund this? So one of our recommendations for funding is to have this come out of the fund balance. So money that is currently in our fund balance, so we wouldn't have to take on additional debt for this. What we're asking for is for $200,000 to come from the general fund balance, $125,000 to come from the public works building, so that's money that we've already taken on in debt, and we're paying interest on that anyways. And then $20,691 from operational savings the first year is how we would expect to pay for that. And so just the simple payback of this project has changed a little bit based on the numbers that Jeff gave us earlier today, but it's about 11 years for simple to pay back that 345 to get that back into our fund balance. I'm sorry.
2691, is that because it's just a half year, or?
Yes,
Okay,
exactly.
all right.
Yep, because we're assuming that we have to make this purchase by December 31st of 2018. That's what I was putting in there. And so really, these are funds that we have in our fund balance right now, and we can get a 10% return on that for the first 20 years of the
You're
project.
saying at the end of this, the asset is still worth,
We would, so after 20 years, the net value it's changed a little bit from the memo that I created, but about $341,000. So the first 11 years to pay back our fund balance. So it's not debt that we'd be paying back, it's paying back our fund balance. And then after that, it's just operational savings for the town.
theoretically, the panels would last.
Theoretically, and it certainly would have some salvage value at that time. Anyways, I mean, there's aluminum in it, and there are other parts that might have value. It would seem to me that, even used panels would have some value. But, I know what I'm gonna do with mine is I'll keep running it for as long as I can. A lot of the cost of these projects is the permitting, putting the electric service to it, the labor of installing it. Replacing panels or replacing inverters is a relatively simple, operation. So, presumably it could go on indefinitely.
Further questions, comments?
So, first of all, hey, Jeff. My question, I guess, really focused more on Jennifer's memo. And I think the first question I had, I wanted to make sure, but you answered already. This would be purchased during fiscal year 19, and specifically by December 31st.
Yes.
So this is the decision we pretty much have to make tonight.
We have to make the decision whether or not to put it on the warning, because I believe the decision has already been made that we would put this as part of the Australian ballot, if the select board wanted to, that they wouldn't include it. It's not included in our budget right now.
So my biggest question is the 10% return approximately 11-year payback? Again, sorry, I'm an engineer, I'm not a financial person. For a municipality, how should I look at those numbers? Are those good numbers? Is that a reasonable payback? Is that something I should, I'm looking for advice to how to evaluate those two numbers.
So right now, that $325,000 that we have sitting in the bank, in our fund balance, is gaining about 1%. So instead, we would be investing in this solar panel project, and instead of paying Green Lantern Solar for the rental of those each month, we would actually be receiving the full utility credits.
So if I could repeat what I heard back,
Sure.
I'm gonna be a little bit facetious, but what I heard is you basically saying, what idiot would
I didn't hear you say that.
I did not say that.
I said I was being facetious, would look at want a return of 1% compared to a return of 10%.
If we had other things that we were going to be using our fund balance for, that's something you would want to weigh. Like,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see your point there, too. Yeah, I didn't mean to put words in your mouth that
No.
way, but add some dramatic or emphasis on.
yes.
You know, one of the things that's different about a municipality than, say, a private business is that you really don't, you know, it's one of the reasons I don't do a discount rate, is that you don't have an opportunity to invest in Bitcoin or the stock market, to be facetious.
Yeah.
But you don't have the opportunity to invest in, ventures like that. You know, you can't invest public funds in investment vehicles. This one you're allowed to do. You know, it's a capital investment that has a return. There's so many expenses that a municipality or a school district have that have no return, but you still have to do them, like parking lots and brews and all kinds of stuff. This one, energy projects are unique in that. Energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, whether they be solar or biomass or efficiency, they have a return. They're different they returns on different line items in your budget. So the money goes out one place and it offsets a cost in another place. But the bottom line is that, you're getting something for the money that you put in. And it's a rare opportunity that a municipality has that opportunity.
Further comments or questions from the board?
The question I guess I have is why is it, is this typical that these companies that install these want to sell them off after a certain amount of time, and why? If it's a money generator for them, because why isn't it still a good investment for that? I forget the name of the company.
Typically the way the incentive is counterintuitive. The incentives for particularly solar projects are tax incentives, right? They're tax credits and they're depreciation. The tax credits can be, you can use them immediately if you have that tax appetite. The depreciation is actually accelerated depreciation under a federal, at least the former federal tax law, and you're able to accelerate it over 5 years. Once the tax is fully monetized, it's not unusual for the developer to try to flip it and to try to get the capital back and do it again. There'll be an interesting market. One thing that would be an interesting thing to do is to have a secondary market of buying these projects after the first tax is monetized, because you can redepreciate it. But, the tax incentives are irrelevant for a municipality. And as far as your contract, the way that I read your contract, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an accountant, so I do want to stress that. But the way I read your contract is that you have an either-or choice. Either you continue with the contract or you negotiate at the time of buyout in years 6, 10, and 15. So this is where you have a point in opportunity. And the way I read the contract is that you have to have it voted on. And I think the date is actually 6 years from the inception date, which is September 28th, I believe. So it's probably before the end of the year. I think this is probably your opportunity to put in front of the voters.
When we structured the contract, we structured it knowing that we'd probably have to have a vote, so we had to have the appraisal done in December so we could vote on it in March. And it was specifically set up that way to give us the opportunity to have a discussion and vote.
You have to think about the investment and the return, because it's not quite the same kind of investment or return I would expect from a investment vehicle, but it's investing in solar, so renewable energy, and if it's actually still valuable at the end of the time that we're finished paying for it, that's when we really get big payback, so. Plus, I like the idea of putting it in front of the voters so that we get an idea of what the voters think about investing in renewable energy, like the last topic we talked about, so.
Jeff, you mentioned a critical word for me, negotiate the price. And what, I guess, what does that mean? Or let me ask maybe differently, I should ask a question. Has that price already been negotiated?
It's not up to me to negotiate it. Where I came down on this is that it seemed to me that this was about right. They actually did a very similar analysis to what I did. They came out with a slightly lower number. It's 338,000, I think it was. In their, was it in the contract, or I think it was in the contract that they came up with a number of 338,000. I think it was an addendum on the contract. And then the contract calls for an independent appraisal. So they hired an appraiser. The appraiser, these are difficult to appraise, because there aren't comps. There's no comparables that they can compare it to. This is relatively new territory. You guys were early adopters, so there are a few out there, and they're not necessarily public record of how much they get sold for. So the appraiser tried to apply common appraisal methodologies to come up with a price. Tried 3 different ways. 2 of them he couldn't determine, and the third way was a complicated, discount value future stream, and he came out with a slightly different number of 345,000. To me, it's about the same. It's not, it's not a huge difference, and I think it's debatable. What seemed most important would be to make a decision now rather than miss the opportunity to put in front of the voters. I don't think you'd get a whole lot different answer. You may be able to knock a few $1,000s off, but I doubt it.
Do we have to decide on the amount that we offered today, or just that we want to do it?
Well, we have to decide on the amount that we're going to ask the taxpayers for.
So from a negotiation perspective, we basically put it out for.
The contract said that the price would be determined by an appraisal.
Okay.
I think, I think Rick is right, that I use the term negotiation. I mean, everything is negotiable in theory, but I'm not a lawyer, and this contract is fairly specific. So, the 2 numbers that have been thrown out is, I think 338 is in the appendices of the original contract, and 345 is what the appraisal came up with. And the contract says either this number or that number, whichever is higher.
Yes. And I remember distinctly that language when we negotiated, because I said, well, I raised questions at the time, but it was, in the discussions with the legal counsel and other people in the business, Jeff wasn't involved in it at that point. They said this was very common language.
The other point of reference that you might have is you just did a very similar contract with PEC Electric for your public works. That's when I was here last. And this is essentially the same deal. It was 50, at that time, I think we negotiated the buyout price in year 6 or 7, I can't remember what, at about 50% of the install cost. So the numbers all seem to line up fairly similarly.
The only difference in that contract is that there is no either or, whichever is higher. There's a specific number in that contract.
So our option would be, if if Jeff did his analysis and said, actually, that system's worth about 200,000, you'd be overpaying for this.
Right.
Then we'd be recommending to the select board that we just stay in our current agreement and not buy an asset for more than it's worth. And then if our next opportunity to purchase this would be at year 10, and that is after the solar adder, which Jeff shared, that it's about $9,000 a year that we get for the next 4 years. That would be necessary.
Which helps. You know, where I get stuck is this term fair market value. You know, fair market value, you know, what is fair market value? You know, it's what a buyer is willing to pay a willing seller. You know, and the IRS is fairly specific about this, is that, you know, you cannot sell it for less than fair market value. I haven't quite figured out the rationale for that, but there, you know, at the time, all of the contracts were written the same way. The fair market, this number or fair market value, whichever is higher, which is really counterintuitive. But, you know,
Collects its tax dollars, so that's, they won't let you sell
I
it
don't
for a
know how
dollar
it benefits
because.
the IRS, frankly, you know, what the sales price is. But this seems to me reasonable. You know, it's not out of the realm of what would be reasonable to me. Jennifer's exactly right. If I had come up with a number much lower than this, I would have told you.
But if you came up with a lower number, it would be based on having a lower revenue stream?
Yes,
or
exactly.
So your value is based on the revenue stream, which gets us a kind of a return value, if you will. Assuming you have the money at the end, I guess.
Well, that's the good news about solar, is solar is eminently predictable.
Yeah.
You know, if the sun doesn't shine, we got a lot bigger problems.
Any further questions or comments from the board?
Just to explore this issue, hopefully just a short bit more, is the 345, 691 fair market value, we're fairly confident that will be the selling price.
Well, that's definitely be the selling price. That was the price, well, I mean, that's what they're offering right now. That's what they're offering.
Price.
That is, okay, all right, so there is a commitment from them to sell it at that price. What I was getting at is, this is all about risk. How much risk are we taking if we move ahead with, you know, the numbers that have presented us, only to have Green Lantern Capital, please excuse my language, it's late, I can't come up with something quicker, but use lawyerese to sit there and say, well, you know, this really, you know, even though you read our contract this way, our lawyers are saying we can interpret it this way and the real amount is 500,000. There's very little risk of that type of a scenario, okay, because they've already agreed to this price, all right.
Yeah, no, they understand that this is something that has to go in front of the voters, and the voters will approve what we can purchase it for.
I just want to make sure they
That's what
understand
they've
this is
given
what they're selling it for, and I'm hearing, yes, it is, okay. Then, I think I'm good.
We have members of the Conservation Commission with us tonight. Do you wish to weigh in on on this?
So would the chair entertain a motion?
I will.
Move to place an article on the town meeting warning for a vote by Australian ballot for the purchase of solar panels presently located on the town-owned property located behind the town hall.
Discussion on the motion. If there's no discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good. Thank you. We'll move on to the regional dispatch resolution. Rick?
I actually don't have a whole lot more to add to what we've talked about in other meetings. If you recall, we've had several PowerPoint presentations, a number of discussions about the documents that, if the vote is held in town and it's favorable, that the town will be signing. The first is an agreement to create a regional authority. And that agreement does not include a requirement the town actually receive and pay for the services. It just gives us a seat at the table. The second agreement is a memorandum of understanding, and that is a select board decision that would come after and assuming there is a favorable vote informing the authority.
How many years do we have?
I don't recall the
You
exact.
only get a certain number of years at the table, correct? I think is it 3 years?
Yeah, I think 3, but it's something like that. In my last memo to the select board, though, I looked at various scenarios, and in my estimation, we don't have a whole lot to lose by agreeing to form the authority. We already, part of our dispatch right now is handled by police, and we can continue that if we join this authority. Another part of our police dispatching is actually done by the state police. That's a separate issue, and the state police at different points have said they may want to shed that responsibility at some point. That hasn't moved forward, so they're still offering that service, and that wouldn't be changed by this necessarily. Then the third piece is our fire and ambulance, which is currently dispatched by the town of Shelburne. So one scenario is the town of Shelburne decides not to join the authority. So then we have a choice. Do we have it continue to be dispatched by the town of Shelburne, or do we move it to the authority? Let's say the town of Shelburne does decide to join the authority, and they vote that way. Then we will be moving with them, but presumably we'd be paying less if we're a member than if we're a non-member. Because I'm expecting, the fee schedules haven't been set, but I'm expecting that the services will be offered to municipalities that are not part of the authority, but at a higher rate.
But we would still likely pay more because we would be adding, the police on top of that? Or could we split our services?
We could split, and I asked this question of the, and of course, they didn't really have the authority to respond, but the question I posed was, well, do we retain our full membership under this agreement if we're just having fire and ambulance dispatched? And, there wasn't a clear answer, but I think they would prefer to have Williston part of this, even if it's just ambulance and fire, than not part of it. And so, that's as close an answer as I can get to that issue at this point. So my expectation, although again, I don't have firm numbers, my expectation is that once we switch over, the fire and ambulance dispatch will not cost any more than it currently costs. I do expect, though, that if we move police into that, it will cost more, understanding that we'll have savings because we'll have less staff, but we won't necessarily have 100% less staff because some of our dispatchers, or some of the dispatch work, I should say, is beyond just dispatch. They do records. That's a different pay grade of work, so, but there's still that work that has to get done, and we'd have to pay someone to do it.
And we don't pay the state police.
And that's correct. That's the biggest piece of this. We don't currently pay the state police for that service. And that's a significant chunk of the total time that our police are actually dispatched. So, all in all, and of course, there's also the risk that at some point the state may pull the plug on providing that service. And, we'll be in a position to easily move police into this organization. For all those reasons, I think it makes sense for the town to at least take this first step in agreeing to form the regional authority.
Are there any questions or comments?
Rick, you reviewed this?
The resolution?
Yes.
Yes.
Including the rather extensive list of whereases?
I know, I objected to that, but this exact resolution has been adopted by every single town, so it's, and also the wording that's being proposed for the town meeting warning is also the exact same wording being adopted by every single town, and has been reviewed by multiple legal counsels.
Okay.
questions or comments? Every motion is in order.
I move to adopt the resolution for the formation of a union municipal district and to place an article on the warning for town meeting for a vote by Australian ballot that, if approved, permits the town to enter into an agreement for the formation of a union municipal district for the purpose of providing regional emergency dispatch services.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Good. We'll move on to,
Pass the motion along for signatures.
move on to the town meeting warning.
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna send another copy around too.
So do I have a copy of that, or is it, was it soft copy?
This is the copy I meant to send around.
Oh, okay.
So we've filled out most of, through various motions the board has taken, the warning. There's one issue that I highlighted in my manager's report, that board has actually already voted on. This is in January 2017, but there's been a lot of discussion, and so I wanted to highlight that, and I'm sure that's why the Conservation Commission members are here. And it relates to the Winooski Valley Park District. The board voted in January 2017, January 24th, 2017 to be exact, to put to a town vote by Australian ballot in March 2018 the proposal to withdraw as a member of the Winooski Valley Park District if the district does not take affirmative action to change the member funding allocation formula. The authority of the district, rather, has had a number of meetings over the course of the year, including a fair amount of discussion on this topic, but they have not taken any action to change the formula. And for that reason, well, the issue is still in front of us, and I know that they have worked to try to address some of the other concerns we've had, including those that were initially raised by the Conservation Commission. And the district has made some progress on those areas. And with the acquisition of the property that we just recently acquired, the district is hoping to be able to take that property and develop it, and by develop, I mean create access to it and manage that property for the town. And so there certainly would be value. However, in my mind, even if we have that property being managed by the district, we're still overpaying our share. The amount that we pay is based on a formula that was developed long ago, 1987, and thereabouts is when the town initially voted to join the authority. And it's 50% based on population and 50% based on grand list. And the rationale was, at the time, is the grand list is an approximation of ability to pay. The problem with that is that the money that was the value of our grand list largely helped pay for education. The state changed the name, the roles basically, when they took over education funding, and so that value that the town had was taken away from us. So that money that we had, that was value, that put us in a position of being richer than the other communities, it's been taken away and redistributed already. That money's already going to places like Winooski and Burlington. In fact, if you look at their school tax rates, they're lower than our school tax rate for that very reason. And so, for all those reasons, and you know, the board's already voted this, I would say, recommend that the board take no further action and include this item on the warning for town meeting vote. And it would have to be by Australian ballot.
So If we chose not to put this on the ballot, we would need to have a motion to rescind our action that we had a year ago. And, but before we do anything on that score, we'll ask the Conservation Commission to weigh in on their recommendation and the letter that we had from Melinda Scott.
Thank you. Go ahead. Okay.
Just identify yourself for me.
My name's Carl Runge. I'm a member of the Conservation Commission. And we are here to address Article number 7 that Rick has so well explained the issues of. The Conservation Commission through Melinda Scott has sent Rick a memo that provides our strong endorsement of continuing membership in the Winooski Valley Park District. We do not want to see Williston withdraw from the Park District. And we're here to kind of emphasize that point, I believe. And I would like to just read my own statement about this, if you will indulge me. I've been a member of the Conservation Commission for the past 28 years and during which time we have worked with the Winooski Valley Park District most of that time. The relationship between the town and the Park District has had its ups and downs over the years, but in the past several years, since Nick Warner has been the director, the relationship has greatly improved. The main sticking point, in addition to the formula and Rick's perceived inequity in that regard, and I'm not going to really address that. But the main sticking point is that the Park District has had no parks in Williston through most of the time. Thus, our membership has primarily supported its mission of acquiring and managing public parks in other towns. And the reason for this has to do with Williston's Environmental Reserve Fund, which is a far-sighted and generous town program that started in 1989 to acquire and manage parks and conservation properties in Williston. Since 1989, the town has allocated $1.9 million to the ERF. This money has purchased by PDR or fee simple 1,830 acres over the years for $1.795 million. This land has been valued at $3.57 million, indicating that the town has leveraged as much as it has spent to acquire the land. The problem currently, and probably the main reason that we want to continue with the Winooski Park District, is that the town's purchase of the Catamount property is going to deplete the ERF. Furthermore, the labor resources of the town, provided by the planning office and our summer interns, are at their limit for managing the land that we already have. Pretty well tapped out in terms of what we can and what we can manage at this point. So the time is really right for the Winooski Valley Park District to step in to both acquire and manage new properties in Williston as they become available. And we have a current golden opportunity for this, was Rick explained, with the Jacobs property on the Winooski riverfront. I don't think we're at the point where we were fortunate to acquire that property without cost, but I don't think we have the money or the labor to manage that property and develop that property. So we strongly recommend continued membership in the Winooski Valley Park District. In our opinion, to discontinue now would be penny wise and pound foolish. And as an aside, I just want to comment on what to do about that, that if you were to agree with this viewpoint, what to do about with Article 7. Could you, as Rick pointed out, this was passed, that the reason it's there is because it was passed by the Select Board 1 year ago. Could you rescind that? Or if you decided you couldn't rescind it, could you put that article in a more positive light? In other words, put it that despite the fact that the funding formula hasn't changed, that the town, that the vote would be that the town continues as a member of the Winooski Valley Park District. And we say this because, okay, they didn't change the funding formula, and frankly, I don't know how they could have without changing it for every other town. But they did step up to take on the acquisition and management of new parks in Williston, which is what we wanted all along. So we're kind of we're on the verge of getting what we've always wanted from the Winooski Valley Park District. And I think it would be a shame to stop our membership in it at this point.
Yeah, I'm Eric Howe, also a member of the town and member of the Williston Conservation Commission. And so I'm speaking also on behalf of the Conservation Commission and my informed viewpoints as a resident of the town tonight. A lot of what I'm going to say, I'm going to echo what Carl said, but I just wanted to also provide a little bit more historical context, not quite as far back as Carl goes. I've been on the commission for 9 years, maybe, but I'm going to go back to 2013, and I believe that Terry and Jeff were on the select board, so we have some new folks now. So in 2013, Gary and I were here in front of this group almost the same time of year talking about the Conservation Commission's viewpoints on the Winooski Valley Park District. And I know that because I looked through the minutes before I came here. And we talked with the group about how the Conservation Commission should not, or did not support continued membership with the Park District. For the reasons, some of the reasons that Carl outlined. They did not have, in my opinion, they did not have very strong leadership at that point. They did not have lands within the town that they were managing. The town's contribution to the Environmental Reserve Fund was being cut, had been cut back to zero, essentially. Maybe it was $10,000 that year, I don't recall, but it had been on the order of $60,000 to $65,000. And there was also proposed cuts to other elements of the Conservation Commission budget, like trails management and other parts. So in our viewpoint, at that point, that's why we were recommending that the town consider that $30,000 that it was sending to the Winooski Valley Park District. Gary and I came back in here again, January 2014, with more or less the same message. Encourage you to consider it again. That was when you discovered that it had to go to the town by Australian ballot. No action, as far as I know. There was some conversation about that in 2014, but never really went anywhere. In 2014, later in 2014, they had turnover. Nick Warner came in, and now he's been there for 4 years now, and is what I consider, and Carl also said, this very strong leadership in that district, in that program. And he has worked with us rather than working against us. He's worked with us to find ways to find common ground for the town and the park district within our goals for managing town parks. And we are now, we reversed our opinion. We think, as Carl said, that the town should continue its support for the Winooski Valley Park District. And that we feel that is a good use of town funds now. It's, again, under strong leadership. He has a strong vision. He's finding ways to augment their budget that they have, they receive. He's finding ways to augment their funding on top of the membership dues they receive from their towns. Carl mentioned the Jacobs parcel. You guys are familiar with that, I presume, that opportunity that we have here. And as Carl mentioned, the town is essentially at capacity for managing the town parcels that we have now, or the town parks and trail network. And that's why I think it's more important now than ever that we actually maintain our membership with the Valley Parks, with Winooski Valley Park District, rather than opt out of it, because they have those resources that they can bring to the table and develop this new parcel, give the folks who live on that part of 2A, the northern part of 2A, access to a new park and the river. And
and enjoy that resource that's right in their backyard that they really can't do right now without trespassing, I guess, on what had been private land. Yeah, I guess that's all I had to say. I just encourage you also, like what Carl was saying, I encourage you to look at the wording that you're using in the